From Wana Brands, welcome to Enhance Your Life. I'm your host, Jonathan Small, and each week I talk to people from all sorts of professions and backgrounds about how cannabis has enhanced their lives and how this healing plant can enrich your life too. Hey everybody, welcome to the Enhance Your Life podcast. I am your host, Jonathan Small. So glad you could join us. Today we have a fascinating guest. Dr. Trina Hazzah joins us, and Dr. Hazzah is an integrative veterinary oncologist and a veterinary cannabis educator. Dr. Hazzah is also the founder of the Veterinary Cannabis Society, which is the first nonprofit which is focused on raising awareness of cannabis as medicine for animals. Dr. Hazzah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you for all the great work you're doing on behalf of our furry little companions and big companions.
Some of them are bigger than
Yeah, some of them are very large. I would love to get a little bit of your background and understand a little bit more what you do from day to day.
As a veterinary integrative oncologist, I actually combine both Eastern and Western medicine when treating my patients, right? So it's not just the typical chemotherapy, immunotherapy, recommending radiation. I'm actually looking at the entire patient, the whole patient, and trying to figure out what approach is best for that individual patient. So what I call personalized medicine. And that means I combine some of the modalities that I think may be most effective from, say, the Western pharmaceutical type practice, as well as some of the traditional Chinese herbal medicine, some of the Western herbs, medicinal mushrooms, and of course, cannabinoid therapy. As there's been, a significant amount of research with cannabis, it's fascinating for me as an oncologist to look at some of those specific cancer pathways and figuring out how I can implement cannabis in some of these patients for a true anti-cancer approach, as well as supporting the patient, right? So there are cases where we're not even trying to necessarily promote or support an anti-cancer approach because the prognosis may be so poor, the pet is feeling so dumpy, and they may not have a significant amount of time. So really the goal for that type of case may be, how can I give them the most amount of time possible? And it needs to be quality time. And so I have found in a lot of my patients that they can have significant quality improvement when they're on cannabis, including pain relief, right? I mean, some of these cancers, even just the typical pharmaceuticals, I cannot get pain relief until I add a product that has a little bit of THC in some cases with severe bone pain. And even just high doses of CBD can help with some of these cases that are just so painful. So really adding that in to reduce pain. Some can certainly help with overall well-being, right? These dogs are starting just to be happier. They feel better. Reduction in nausea is a big thing. Just like in people with chemotherapeutics and certain systemic therapies, and even radiation therapy, you can get secondary nausea. So adding in cannabis therapy and certain other Eastern modalities and Western herbs can really support the patient, help them reduce nausea, increase appetite, things like that. So it's really been a blessing, and I think an honor to be able to use some of these type of kind of alternative medicine to support patients.
It's wonderful what you do. And as you speak, it's hard to, you say the patients, and I keep thinking you're talking about human beings also, because it sounds like exactly the way one might use cannabis for human beings. Tell me a little bit about why this isn't more of a common practice among veterinarians around the world.
God, it's tough, right? I mean, I think that because of the FDA status, right, of specifically of THC, right? So with THC still being Schedule 1, it's really, really hard to be able to get a veterinary medical board, so the people that really kind of enforce what happens with our licenses, to really get on board and say, hey guys, look at the studies. There is evidence to support it. So it supports several different conditions in human beings. And we have already, I would say, a handful of published reports in veterinary medicine just since 2018 that supports the efficacy in certain diseases like osteoarthritis and seizures for animals. And so, the biggest problem is as you go to these veterinary medical board meetings, which I've gone to several, And they say there's just not enough evidence. And I think we are using medicine every day, pharmaceuticals, that there literally is very little evidence, but we're fighting because you're afraid of the stigma of marijuana. And so I'll give you a perfect example. God, it was probably about a year and a half ago. I went up to UC Davis, so Northern California, to speak at a veterinary medical board meeting in California. And one of I was the vice president at that time of the board, says, she compared marijuana to heroin.
Oh, God.
And I mean, we were shocked. He said, there is so much data to support this, even safety. There are safety studies. And so it was just appalling. I mean, I think it's a struggle. So there's that part, right? And I think that despite the passing of the 2018 Farm Bill, there is no FDA classification or recognition of supplements, nutraceuticals, or medical food in veterinary medicine. So that's a big statement right there. So until the FDA finishes and reviews and they actually provide regulatory codes, it's not really technically legal to sell products that are derived from hemp. So
Amazing.
that's a statement that I think not everyone knows. So when you think about the hemp-derived cannabis products, which are similar to, say, many of the common veterinary supplements. So I'm prescribing all day turmeric and curcumin, just the compound within turmeric. I'm dispensing, medicinal mushrooms and Chinese herbs, right?
Yeah.
Even though they really are kind of in the same category, if you will, they're not recognized by the FDA as a food or a drug. This is hemp-based CBD, right? So they cannot be legally administered, dispensed, recommended, or prescribed with an intent to prevent, treat, or cure a condition. So that's how they say in veterinary, when you're doing those things, you must use an FDA-approved product, which is a little bit of a double-edged sword because we do it all the time with all these other non-FDA approved products, right? I think that's really, really tough. And so when you think of this market that's been established for pet products, right? Like CBD-based pet products, I mean, it's tremendous, right? There's so many CBD products. And you think to yourself, well, veterinarians are not really even able to dispense them or do any of these things, but it's happening all the time. Veterinarians are telling pet parents what to pick up and what not to do. And there are pet product companies that are making these supplements like it's nobody's business.
Right.
And I think the truth is that the FDA has kind of turned a blind eye on some of these companies saying, listen, if you're not making outrageous claims, right? That's the big thing. If you're not making these outrageous claims, we're going to kind of leave you alone. But when you start doing stuff that we don't like, we're going to really let you know that you're going to need to cease and desist, right? So that's kind of what's happened for veterinary products. For veterinarians, because the veterinary medical boards have really had an issue with this topic, right? I think a lot of it is going to just be an education, right? Educating the veterinary medical boards. So writing papers, like we actually just published a paper on cannabis and veterinary medicine, a critical review. It was a 25-page review article. And it was, I mean, look, I'd love to say it's totally neutral, but it's many of us that are pro-cannabis writing the paper. But we really tried to make it factual. We said, here are the facts. Here are the studies that support some of the efficacy claims. Here are the real science, the nitty-gritty molecular science behind it. But also, here is some information on toxicity that's important to know. And everyone needs to know that. I'm not coming in saying there are no side effects. There certainly are potential for side effects, and we need to discuss that openly. And so I think being able to do that with veterinary medical boards, and we certainly did that in California in 2019. We were able to really push a bill forward. AB 2215 was the first bill that allowed veterinarians the right to discuss cannabis with pet parents and really get into some detail with them. The problem is it didn't allow us to actually recommend. Well, how do you discuss and not recommend? Isn't it just kind of one full spectrum? Where does discuss end and recommend begin?
But you do both, right? I mean, you discuss and recommend. And how do you get around it?
Legally, I can't actually recommend. I can only discuss. And so what I do is I just take discuss to as far as discuss can go. So I discuss the pros and the cons. I discuss that your pet also has a heart condition, and we need to be very careful when implementing cannabis. And what are the safe ways to do that? Without making a formal recommendation, I take discuss very, very far and make sure that pet parents feel supported and make sure that veterinarians in the community really also feel supported, right? Because a lot of veterinarians are afraid. They don't know how far they can take discuss and what are they allowed to say. And with the education perspective, if we can educate veterinarians, they'll feel much more comfortable being able to discuss with pet parents. And Michigan State actually just passed a very similar bill. So we are currently the only two states that have veterinary cannabis bills.
So far we're talking very, not abstract terms, but more broad terms about the effect of cannabis on pets. But I think sometimes when you tell a story or a personal story that you've had of the effect that cannabis has had on one of your patients, it really brings it home, I think, for the listener and for the interested public. Can you share a story or two of how cannabis has really improved the life of one of your patients?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with my own cat. You practice medicine, and then you say, God, it seems to work. But when you see it in your own house,
yeah, your own
it hits
family
you in such a major way, right? And so I'll give you a very, very good example. You know how they say the shoemakers, their own kids are the ones that aren't wearing shoes, right? Isn't that, there's like a phrase about that, right? And so I always think about that for veterinarians, that we sometimes are the worst pet parent, right? We do so much for all the pets out there. And then when it comes to our pets, we see something and we're like, we'll get back to it. We'll watch it, instead of being as proactive as we like to do. And as we preach, right? We don't always practice what we preach. And so I think a good example would be my cat named Mr. Bean, who
cute name.
He was found in Connecticut, on the streets of Connecticut, blind and circling.
Oh.
And I showed up at a cat shelter because my dog, who was my best friend, was starting to get very old. And I think, he was having very limited time. I was a medical oncology resident working, 16 hours a day, and I didn't want him to be at home alone. So I have always been a dog person and never thought I'd be a cat person. And I said, you know what? I can't get another dog during this residency. I'm going to get a cat for my dog.
Mm-hmm.
So dog would have a friend. So I run over to this place and I looked at almost 200 cats. I didn't like any of them. I was leaving. I went into the room where the woman that was doing all the paperwork with me was there, and I see this cat and I said, hey, what's wrong with this cat? He looks so funny. He said, I don't know. We found him blind circling. Oh. And I said, God, he's just so funny looking. I mean, he was like this squished little cat. His vertebra was all off. His little limbs were super short. They were half the size of a normal cat.
Oh, wow. And
his cornea, the kind of the layer above of his eye was all cloudy. So he had this cloudy cornea. And I thought, geez, what is going on with this guy? And she said, you can't have him. You can have any other cat, but you can't have him. So I went home and I thought, okay, well, I don't want any other cat then. And a few nights later, she shows up at my door with a cat, a bunch of cat toys and some food, and said, fine, you can have him. So she said, but just so you're aware, he will take 6 months to probably come out of the closet. He's really, really nervous. And I thought, okay, whatever, let's give him a closet. So I gave him a closet. And around 2:00 in the morning that night, and she even brought stairs for this cat because he just has very unusual limbs, so he can't jump. So she put the stairs next to my bed and we went to sleep, the dog and I. And 2:00 in the morning, we feel something. And it's this cat that climbs on the bed and cuddles right into my dog, right on his belly, and goes right to sleep. And I thought, okay, there's no way I'm giving this cat back. He's done exactly. And I was told he was only going to live for 6 months because of his condition. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm glad I can give him a home and he can be friends with my dog. Well, 10 years later, he's moved to California with me, working as a veterinary oncologist here at the largest veterinary hospital west of the Mississippi. And he's been with me that whole time. And probably got around 10 years old, I noticed that he was starting to have trouble breathing. And I thought, God, it must be his heart. I mean, he's deformed, right, in multiple places. He's got anatomic deformities. I wonder if it's just his heart. And of course, I sat on it, and I was in denial, as many of us are, about our own pets. And finally, his breathing was so bad that I was like, I just have to bring him in. So I brought him into the vet clinic, and we took some x-rays, and unfortunately, there was a tumor that was taking up 90% of his lungs.
Oh.
It was amazing that he was able to breathe.
Amazing.
And he was still eating, but he wasn't playing with, my other dog had passed clearly. And so now we had this new Chihuahua Labrador mix, don't ask. and he was like hanging out with us. He loves dogs, and he had another cat friend, and he was playing with them, but he had stopped doing that. And he was just very lethargic, would just kind of lay on his side and have difficulty breathing. So I saw this tumor, and and he was a cat that hated coming to the vet, hated it. So I had this conversation with him and said, listen, I know you hate going in. This is not good. I could do radiation. I could do chemo. I could do all of this stuff. But is that really what you want? That's something that you've never wanted to do. I don't want to push this on you. And you've already outlived this 6-month time you were supposed to have 10 years ago. So I brought him home. I started him on steroids, thinking that was the best thing to do based off of the tumor type that was suspected. And it actually got worse. His breathing got worse. He wouldn't eat. Stopped it and said, you know what? Why am I not starting cannabis? I use it in all my patient population, most of my patient population. So I worked with a company here in California that does custom cannabis products for pets called Right Ratio. And I love the idea that I would be able to have some sort of say as a cannabis clinician, that I might be able to add certain terpenoids and add in a certain amount of THC and CBD and other cannabinoids. There were some acids in there. And I thought in my mind, based off of everything I had read, THC is a bronchodilator. Alpha pinene is a bronchodilator. Why not beta caryophyllene has the potential to be a really potent anti-inflammatory? I could put together a medicine that might be able to make this guy feel better. And so I had the really very fortunate to be able to work with this company, and they were very kind to let me be part of it. And I made this product for my kid, and he started it. And I would say within a week, he was already starting to feel better. You could see the difference in his eyes. He wasn't laying down. He was actually getting up. And what was fascinating is he had the munchies. Like nobody's business. I say it's fascinating because in veterinary medicine, with hundreds and hundreds of patients I've treated in the last, 4 to 5 years, I will tell you that I would say less than 10% of dogs will really have the munchies, if you will, right? Really have the increased appetite. Cats maybe a little bit more, but nothing like you see in human medicine. And so he was literally eating the food out of the dog's bowl while the dog was eating.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, it was the cutest thing.
So cute.
He was running up and down the stairs. Within about a month, he was better than he was before he had breathing issues.
That's amazing.
He was breathing completely normal. He was just the happiest cat. And I thought to myself, how is it that I took this long to start cannabis in this cat? It wasn't fair. He had arthritis. He had all these issues secondary to his cancer, right? For me to start it. And he lived for 6 months. He ended up going he was mostly blind, but he went completely blind. And I had the ophthalmologist come and take a look, and he said, I think it's related to the disease that he had this whole time. I'm not convinced it had anything to do with his cancer. And I would agree completely with that because his breathing was still completely normal at the end. I think he just passed away from what they call he had a polysaccharide storage disease. So something very different and unrelated. But that was something that I'll never forget. And I lived it with him every day. And I remember the titration, what we call titration of the dose, right? Increasing the dose, finding his optimal dose and what that was like. And I think pet parents do struggle with that, right? Figuring out what's the right dose for my pet.
Right, because they can't tell you. Yeah, they can't. I mean, they can in their own way, but not through words. So sometimes it's hard to know. By the way, that's just a beautiful story. And are you a cat person now?
I mean, I totally am. Now I am like a both person, right? I
Yeah.
love dogs. It's changed the way I even practice, right? Because of the way I view cats, right? I mean, and I have another cat now that also has a brain disorder,
Oh
and
my
he
goodness.
walks
You're a
around like
saint.
he's a little drunk man. But he's my best. I mean, he's literally my best friend. He's taken the place of a dog for sure, So absolutely.
So this issue of, what are we to do as patients if our pets are showing some sort of disease or you sense some sort of pain, or even if you just want, as part of their sort of healthy regimen, you want to introduce cannabis or CBD into their regimen, what do we do? Because I mean, as you said, veterinarians, it's crazy because you can buy CBD for pets anywhere. I mean, it's all over the place. It's all over the healthy spot here in Los Angeles and, Whole Foods, et cetera. But there's nobody who's allowed to tell you how to use it for your pets. So you're sort of left to your own devices with it. It's all backwards the way it's all happening. So what do you recommend that we do as parents?
Yeah, I think that I would start by asking your veterinarian, because there's certainly a lot of veterinarians, especially in California, because of the new bill, that have taken the initiative to really go get educated on the topic, right? And so there are going to be some that said, "Oh my God, I just took a course and now I feel much more comfortable to have this discussion with you." And they may ride the recommendation line as careful as they can as well, but make sure to be there to support you and your pet. So that's certainly one thing. And if your vet says, "Listen, I'm still afraid. I don't want to talk about it. I don't have any knowledge about the topic," right? Because certainly they did not teach vet students in vet school about, the endocannabinoid system or cannabis or any of that. So unless they went and got a little bit more advanced education, they just don't have the understanding. There's a few places that I think pet parents can go. One is this nonprofit that we started called Veterinary Cannabis Society that you mentioned. The real goal behind that is to empower the veterinarian, the pet parent, and the cannabis producer that makes pet products, really give them a well-rounded knowledge in cannabis for pets, and also come from the advocacy perspective. We're all on the same page. We all want the same rights for veterinarians and for our pets. And so by really fighting and making sure veterinarians can recommend and actually write recommendations, just like physicians, right? We get to a whole nother place where we can then be there completely and fully for your pets. So the advocacy part is a big portion of VCS, but we, as part of the education part, there's actually going to be membership portals for veterinary professionals, for pet parents, and for cannabis producers, where you can enter there and see articles and podcasts and presentations by top veterinary experts, where we're really educating on this topic and making sure that real accurate information is coming across. I think what is happening is you're getting a lot of inaccurate terminology and inaccurate information out there. And so this becomes really a hub of information for everyone that's included. It's like a family around a pet, right? You have the actual family that lives at home, but you have your veterinarian, you have the producers that are going to making these products for your pet. And you need to make sure these producers are well versed in the potential toxicities for dogs and cats, and which patients are that we need to be more worried or that have potential contraindications and so forth. So Veterinary Cannabis Society is certainly a wonderful place. It's nonprofit, which is even better because we're really doing it for the good of the pet, right? And making sure that there is awareness of cannabis as medicine for pets. So that's a huge place that within, I would say, the next month and a half, there's going to be a very robust website with different membership portals that will give a lot of people information. So that's the first.
How do we find that website, just so we have?
Oh, please. Thank you for asking me that. The easiest is going to VCS, so Veterinary Cannabis Society, so VCS .pet. That's super easy. Or you can go to veterinarycannabis.org. Go right there and you'll get all the information you want. The other would be, there's a company called veterinarycannabis.org that actually does cannabis consults for pet parents. So I run into that a lot where I have pet parents that really want a heavy recommendation protocol. They want someone to be by their side and showing them how to titrate, how to do those things. And with the restrictions that we have in California, and of course, most other states, and almost all other states at this point, if I have pet parents that really need that, I'll say, hey, listen, go to veterinarycannabis.org. It allows pet parents to be supported. And I do think that some pet parents want support in every single step, right? Not just, hey, there's some products, go ahead and titrate. What does that even mean? What do I start with? What dose do I get up to? Those type of things. I also am very excited to say that I'll be starting a veterinary cannabis consulting company as well. I have my own S Corp called Green Nile Incorporated, where I do many different consultations with companies, pet product companies, and really helping to guide them as well. And I do consults for veterinarians through there. But what I realize is, if I can just, stay within the legal limits in California, but discuss as far again as I possibly can, why can't I just do that and maybe change directions a little bit? And instead of doing, one case at a time at a veterinary hospital where I might be seeing just a handful of cases sometimes, and I'm doing veterinary oncology predominantly, where my niche really is and where my passion and skill set has really become is in veterinary cannabis and the clinical application of it. That is my jam. I love it. I'm great at it. And I think that over 10 years of working as a veterinary integrative oncologist, I've gotten the nuances down so well that throwing in cannabis, just another botanical, has been a very easy transition. But because of my knowledge as an oncologist, I can read those papers so critically and figure out what I would consider almost like a narrative. Why use certain products that have certain cannabinoids? Is there basis behind that? And can I support a pet parent in a very different way? And so what I'm starting to, in the upcoming months, my goal and really what I'm working toward is having my own veterinary cannabis consulting company where I can just get on the phone and have these conversations with pet parents and still stay within the lines of being legal still, and having, say, a technician do some of the actual, say, recommendation part, but I support and explain why we're doing what we're doing, because that's completely legal. Being able to discuss the why behind, and the how. I can do some of the how, but I can have a colleague like a cannabis veterinary counselor, which is a veterinary technician, do some of that work that I'm not able to do at this time. So that's going to be a really nice balance, I think, for pet parents, and being able to see many more cases and impact many more pet parents and many more pets that way will really feel good and feel like I'm doing my life's mission as well.
Well, I would certainly use your service and will certainly use your service because Lord knows I have many questions, and you're obviously one of the foremost experts in this. I could talk to you all day about this. I'm going to let you go. This is such a wonderfully enlightening, and thank you so much for all the work that you do on behalf of our companions, our best friends, and I wish you continued success.
Thank you so much. If anyone wants to reach me, I'm at drtrinahazzah.com. Feel free. I have email through there, and so feel free to reach out if I can be of service. But thank you, Jonathan, for having me. I really, really appreciate it. I've had a great time.
Enhance Your Life is brought to you by Wana, the #1 infused product in the U.S. Wana's entire process is designed to deliver the same great experience time after time. They have spent years fine-tuning their recipes so that their products are delicious, consistent, and potent. For more information, check out wanawellness.com. That's Wana, W-A-N-A, wellness.com.